Hello, welcome back to the Sacred Rainbow Warrior. Today's a very special episode on healing the ego, understanding the ego, what the ego is. I'm going to talk about what the ego actually is, which is absolutely mind-blowing. I'm going to talk to you about how that links to narcissism. I'm going to talk about past lives, how that links, ego babies, honoring ego death, how to kill the ego, and the practical steps for ego management and sacrifice, what sacrifice truly is. So let's dive in. The reason I know this is I've gone on a very deep journey where I have a deep healing journey for several years, where I met my partner, who was my friend at the time. We became instant best friends because we shared a journey and a passion for healing. And what we did was we mirrored each other. Now, the reason I'm explaining this is the importance of how I have managed to decode what the ego is and how difficult that was. It meant sitting in front of a woman, exposing my shame and mirroring that in the feminine. And by mirroring the feminine, I'm able to see what I'm ignoring within myself and mirror it back to myself and take responsibility and release attachment and dissolve that shame, that ego. And it took me many years to understand what the ego is because when I first started out, which is very common, especially for men, because it's a very mental thing, is I became attached to the idea of gaining knowledge. And knowledge is not wisdom unless it's integrated, which means there's a control, a grabbing using logic. And logic is when you do not understand, sorry, not understand, but it's where you are unable to comprehend that which you don't comprehend. It's the fear of the unknown. It's like trying to say, it's trying to put love in a box when love is everything. And when I finally overcome that by listening to the feminine, listening to my partner and releasing control and going through processes of surrender, I was able to expand my awareness and understand what multidimensionality is. And multidimensionality is essentially when you understand multidimensionality, it's actually the antidote to paradox. Because paradox is when something is right or something is wrong. I don't believe in right and wrong, but where something means this and something means that. But they mean that both at the same time. But the best way to define multidimensionality is with context. So, for example, when it's sunny, it might mean this. When it's raining, it might mean that. It's giving something context. I don't have any real conversational examples right now to give because I can't think of them right now. But when you understand multidimensionality, you're releasing the mind and you're working in the heart because when you're in the heart, it expands with love, and the more you purify the heart, the greater it expands. Where you can expand out to the universe, you can feel everything, know everything, and feel embody everything, and it makes integration so much smoother. That's why the heart of integration is being in the heart. And when I went through that, I I grasped for a moment, and then I expanded it, the idea of what the ego is. And when I said it out loud, I got full body tingles, and then I confirmed it with spirit, and they're like, yeah, of course, like really nonchalantly, and I'm like, but this is huge. So I'm gonna absolutely blow your mind with this. Is I'm going to tell you what the ego is. The ego, and I'm going to explain in detail. The ego is the Akashic records. Many people believe the Akashic records is a library, which is true, where you can look up any past life or future self or any moment, which is exactly what the ego is. The ego is all of the parts of yourself, past lives, etc., in multi-dimensionals in all directions, because you are infinite and multi-dimensional. It's like imagine an infinite mirror image behind you, like in one of those fairs where you just see yourself everywhere, but every one of them looks different. And if first it starts in this lifetime, so it'll look like you, and then it will be younger and younger and younger. And then when you go into other lifetimes, it could be, different beings. You might look like a different human. You might be an animal, whatever. You can be anything. And That's why that's why when healing the ego, you cannot work logically, because imagine trying to heal a life where you were, for example, a cloud, something like that. So you cannot work logically, and you cannot work through attachment or understanding what you're healing in the majority of it. So what's really interesting about what it means, the Akashic records as the ego, is imagine imagine all the parts of yourself that never succeeded, all of the parts of yourself that worked for the dark, and sometimes you worked for the light, and the shame attached to that, the choices that you made when you were fooled, when you were betrayed. Perhaps you killed someone, perhaps you were killed. All of these, like, infinite wounds, infinite lifetimes, infinite possibilities on this planet, and perhaps more. And when I opened that, the first when I first started going through the healing, I started healing everything that happened to me in this lifetime. And then one day, I was sat on my bed and I was conversing with my partner over Zoom, and all of a sudden, my right side, like straight down the middle, my right side just started moving on its own. I had no control over it. I only had control over my left hand, and it was trying to tell me something through movement. And so I had to channel it, and it was trying to help me heal a past life where I was brutally murdered and loads of horrible things were done to me. But it was such a big healing that I it had taken multiple lifetimes. It happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and it was so brutal that I had to go through that healing in this lifetime. It's taken that long to heal it because it was that brutal, and it was so big that it actually involved people who are in my life now, and some of them I've had to kick out of my life because of the karmic ties of what they did to me in that, and what they did to my partner who was part of that vision. And I'm not going to say what it was because absolutely gruesome. And when I went through it, I didn't actually have to feel what happened, but I did see the images, and it took me nearly 3 years to heal that. It was really rough, really rough. A lot of root chakra healing. And when I healed that, I realized it was opening up past lives, and it started going back all the way to the Garden of Eden, Lemuria, Egypt, Atlantis, Avalon, you name it, Babylon, all of these places. And it's incredible because what happens is when you look at the Akashic records as a library, each book is a part of your DNA. So when you open each book and you heal that story, you're unlocking a part of your DNA, and there's hidden gifts in there, hidden healing. And this is the magic that people have been talking about for years, the real magic. What happens when we fully unlock all of our DNA? This is what I call the innate. I talk about this all the time. You go on YouTube and you type cryon and innate. Just watch all the videos on the innate. Honestly, it's so valuable. And there's 12 layers of your DNA, which Cryon talks about. He's got all these books on it. And I worked medicinally, I worked ceremonially with that energy, and I started to embody my soul. And I continue to do that. And the more I unlock hidden parts of hidden memory. And what I've realized is that the unconscious part of, let's call it the mind. I don't really believe in that because the consciousness is the water in you, which you could call the mind. The unconscious is the latent memory in your DNA. So scientists will call that junk DNA, which is absolute nonsense. It's actually the latent DNA which needs to be activated, but the only way you can activate it is through healing. It's like having a ghost image of your DNA where something should be there. And the only way you can heal it is by acknowledging that it was there and acknowledging the healing that is meant to be there. And this is so big, so I've made some notes on this. So excuse me if I get distracted. So yeah, I've written here the a lot of the reasons why I say that the ego is absolutely not your friend, you hear people on the internet growing more towards this, which is really toxic. The ego is not your friend, and it causes all sorts of trouble. It's the saboteur. And when you first start beginning working with the ego, you will realize, a bit like in the film The Matrix, where the agent comes through. If you're still in the Matrix, you're hijacked. And I had to go through this, and being hijacked is really horrible, and it requires a lot of sacrifice. And I'll talk about what sacrifice is, but essentially it means confronting your fears, confronting your shame, and letting go of that. But it's so much bigger than that. The way sacrifice has been misunderstood and ego death is just beyond. So I'm going to go into a lot of detail in that because it's really interesting. But essentially, the past lives build up if they're not dealt with, right? And they get buried in shame, in the unconscious and forgotten about, the great forgetting, or as Pan called it, the spirit of nature, ignorance. The greatest sin of man is ignorance, turning a blind eye to love. You're turning a blind eye to all of the poor choices, all of the pain and shame from all those previous lives that are locked in the Akashic records. And most of them, the ones that cause you pain, the ones that try to make you fail and prevent your dreams from coming true, from recreating yourself, because you are never the same being in every moment. Every moment changes. But if you try to remain the same, you become stagnant. And that is the ego. So it's all of your experiences of failure, heartache, death, manipulation, you name it, all of the horrible stuff, where your dreams couldn't be made true, or you got to a point in your life and you got stuck. It's like even now when I'm growing and growing, there's always hurdles to jump over, because there'll be a past lifetime where my ego made it to this point and got stuck. And you just have to keep on going. You have to keep on going. And this is where I'm going to link it in a moment to narcissism, because narcissism is so important to understand. It's so important. It's really the poster child for the Matrix. And if you can understand how the poster child works and break it into smaller chunks, which I'm going to do, not in this video, but over a branch of videos and some courses on my website, you can heal anything, absolutely anything, because everything is linked to that. So if you look at your personal behaviors, understand your personal behaviors, any negative behavior is linked to your ego. Any negative behavior, any version of love is an obliteration of your ego. Any expression of love, and I'm going to talk about this, how to kill the ego, because I know the word kill sounds really harsh, it sounds drastic, but it really is kill or be killed, and this is a spiritual death. And I've gone through so many different versions of killing my ego, and sometimes there actually is an honoring of those parts that need to die, and I'll go through that as well. But if you can grasp that right now, the collective is actually going to have to look at this. They're going to have to look at this. You can also, as well as saying that the ego is the dark, the Akashic records, it is also the dark night of the soul. And the dark night of the soul can last years. For me, it lasted most of my life, because essentially the dark night of the soul is when you begin healing your ego. And it's where your ego has more control over your life than you do. That's essentially what the dark night of the soul is. And there's going to be a collective dark night of the soul. We just did a channeling on my sister channel, Prophecy Walkers, with my partner. We channeled Nostradamus, and he spoke about this. And it's going to be difficult for people who are holding the light. Well, it might not be, actually. I think I don't agree with that. Actually, I'm going to retract that. It's not going to be difficult. For the people who are doing the work, or who have done a lot of work, it's going to be easier for the people who are just starting out, and we're going to be there to help those people. But there is going to be a collective dark night of the soul. Now I'm going to move on to narcissism now. And I'm going to say this over and over throughout all videos until everyone gets it. Narcissism is toxic shame avoidance. That's common knowledge. But you have to acknowledge that. It's avoiding shame. That's the definition of it. Everything and anything that tries to avoid toxic shame. I'm not talking about healthy shame here. Healthy shame is very rare. Toxic shame, when you're avoiding it, that's the ego. That is the ego. Everything links to that. Like I said, it's the poster child. Imagine a tree with rotten roots, right? The tree is narcissism and it's upside down. And all of the roots are the different types of narcissistic behavior. And there are infinite versions of it. You name me a disease, you name me a poor behavior, you name me a distortion, you name me a mental health disorder, you name me anything that is the opposite of love or is in any way a lie, it relates to toxic shame avoidance. This is how big narcissism is. And the reason and people who avoid talking about it are avoiding their own healing. And so there's this huge relationship between narcissism and the ego. And I find it really interesting when you link all of this to the Akashic records. It's really cosmic and it's quite, it's really, I find it really cool actually. It's really cool. Um, and because you can you can go to any point in your being, in your soul, and you can heal anything. But it's not a targeted healing. You heal what comes up. Like at the moment, it's the 28th of March. I'm filming this on the 28th of March, 2025. And we're going into an eclipse tomorrow, and it's bringing up so much for me. I'm killing the rescuer in me because the rescuer is the fusion between it's the piggy in the middle. It's the fusion between victim and then perpetrator. And so I'm going through this process where I'm not rescuing the rescuer. I'm letting him drown. I'm not throwing him a life raft or anything. So I'm letting that part of my ego die so that I can launch through this eclipse portal in purity. Because if I don't do that, it's going to just emphasize more pain. And in order to do that, I have to feel the suffering, and I'm going to go into that. So, so narcissism again is the ego in different ways. And it's a defense mechanism, right, to protect the ego. And why is it protecting the ego? Because for obvious reason, the ego doesn't want to die, right? Nobody wants to die, but it's a lie. It's a lie, and I'm going to talk more about death and honoring death. But it's about really protecting the darkness, protecting the hijack, and it leads to more narcissistic behaviors. And I talk about triggers, right? If you receive a trigger, like if this video is triggering, instantly mirror it back to yourself and feel the pain, and you can heal that. That's why triggers are brilliant. You shouldn't be avoided. I talk about this so much. Triggers are amazing for healing because just like judgments, you mirror them back to yourself and you can see, oh, I'm actually feeling this or I'm feeling that. I need to look at that and I need to heal that. So it's really important to feel triggers, feel the pain. And when you feel the pain, you're letting it go. And the reason I'm saying feel the pain, because if you're not feeling it, you're avoiding it. And the reason you're feeling it is because you've buried it. And so much can come up, especially in these times that we're in now, where the stars are aligned and everything is just being pushed through us. It's all being pushed through us. It's huge clean out, huge clean out. And you can see it in the collective because what happens in the one happens in the two, happens in the three lines of consciousness. So, um, if you I don't want to talk too much about how horrible or demonizing the ego because you are the ego, right? And when you realize this and confront this, you realize that when you're going through healing, you are confronting your shadow. Now, I've done a lot of videos on uh, uh, healing devil worship and entities. Now, when I first started out, because my ego was hijacked when I first started out, I realized when I got to some very powerful points of healing in my life, choice points, because always choice points. We you get asked over and over to choose for love. I got to these powerful choice points in my life where I had said no to love, and it kept coming round. I kept getting that opportunity to make the right choice, and one of them was facing my shadow and taking responsibility for it. And I faced the devil and I realized it was me. It was just a shadow image of me. And I had to take responsibility for that, for rising and fighting for love. So fighting for my dreams instead of giving up on them. That's how you defeat the ego. And that's very challenging. And I'm going to talk about how to do that. And I talk a lot about this in my integration videos. I've got a playlist on my channel. You can look at the integration ones. So I go into depth about how to do this because it's not easy, and I've had to learn the hard way. I learned through spirit. I learned through my own experience by doing it through my own experience. So the best way to confront ego is just when you're having a bad day, just feel it. Just let the suffering move through you and don't attach to it. Don't go, oh, what is this? What is that? You know, I used to do that a lot. Sometimes it is necessary because you have to understand karmic wounds and karmic ties. But the majority of the time, you can move through something just by making a different choice. So if you're feeling bad and you're like, oh, I'm just going to sit here and do nothing when I should probably go for a run or go for a walk, then that's your ego saying, don't go for a run. I'm going to give you 1,000 excuses why you shouldn't go for a run. And you really just have to go, oh, put your shoes on, put your trainers on, whatever, put your shoe and actually just push yourself and go for that walk. I know how difficult that is. I know how difficult it is. But physical movement is such a huge pillar for healing and destroying the ego. And, like I said, the ego is a narcissist. That's why, people say killing narcissists, you are killing yourself. And I don't mean you're killing the nice parts of yourself. Absolutely not. And it's about bringing your dreams to life. But the what I find, 99.999% of people in the collective, when they receive information about narcissism, the first thing they do is they point at someone. And I've never met anyone other than myself that just pointed the finger at me. I just point the finger at myself every time, take responsibility for it all because I was a narcissist. I had narcissistic behavior. And yes, I received narcissistic abuse and I had to go through and heal that. Of course, I have to acknowledge that I've seen that in others in my life as well. But I took responsibility for my own narcissistic behavior first. And that's the only way you can heal. Only way. You can't just keep blaming everyone because eventually, eventually it's going to turn around and it's going to slap you in the face. So, to my notes, don't recognizing integrating the shame-based effects and so lead healthy. Yeah. So when you take responsibility for all of this, it completely changes your self-perception, changes self-worth, changes how you react with life, how you react with people, your relationships become healthier. I noticed that when I started taking responsibility on my healing, I started receiving people in my life that I wanted to receive instead of receiving toxic people, because essentially what you're doing is you're removing those magnets that attract that which you are holding on to. So if you're a dick, I got called that so many times throughout my years. Like I used to say to people, it used to frustrate me, like, what is it that people don't like about me? And they go, you're just a dick. And I was like, that's really not helpful. But I had that in me where I was just ignorant and unaware of my own behavior. And it took me years to heal that. But because I had that, I attracted those kind of people that would come to me and say, you're just a dick. And they would use me and abuse me. And so you have to let go of those parts, and then you will see your whole life will change. And it doesn't happen overnight. You have to make those choices. You have to make those quantum leaps. Just like in the Matrix, when Neo jumps back in and they go, what are you doing? This is crazy. He goes, it's never been done before, and that's why it's going to work. That's such wisdom. It's such wisdom. Big up yourself, Keanu Reeves. So ego and past lives. So the influence of past lives on the current ego, yeah, formation behaviors, how these past lives shape of it. Right. So this is gold, what I'm about to talk about. So how do our past lives affect our current behaviors? This is so profound. So I will use myself as an example. So I was beaten a lot as a kid, and that meant that I went from this ultra sensitive, beautiful child, like we all are when we're born, we're beautiful children, to having to defend myself, which meant I had to betray myself in order to protect myself. But it was a part of me that betrayed myself, not all of me. So a part of me decided to betray myself so that it could protect the parts of me that were innocent. So these are the sacrifices that we make where we give a part of our soul to the darkness and we create ego. This is how ego is created. And I remember through my journey, I didn't always remember it, but it came up. I remember the day when I made that choice is when I was constantly getting beaten. I was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to fight? Because all I'm doing is just being love. I'm just being a loving kid. Like 6 or 7 years old I was, and I was really polite, and it just triggered the foo-far out of my abuser. And I said, okay, I'm going to fight. And that meant biting, kicking in the shins, swearing, manipulation. I I just became I just became a absolute right. If you want to hurt me, I'm gonna hurt you back, right? And so that was created in my life, and that created violence, more violence. Violence begets violence. And as anyone who follows me or any of my friends know, I've received an extraordinary amount of violence in my head. I've got scars all over my head. It followed me everywhere and until uh mid-adult, mid-30s, I think. And it nearly killed me when I was at university in my first year. I had my head kicked in really, really badly. It completely changed my whole life, my whole analytical mind. It killed a part of me that I had to bring back to life. And it's really dark when we make these choices. Those are the consequences, and that's what has to be healed. And but this is all part of the soul journey. I had to trust in this, trust my soul, that my soul was taking me on the journey that would lead me to something greater, and it did. But I still had to make those choices in alignment to lead me to love. Otherwise, it leads to more darkness. And to begin with, that's what I did. I went full on into the darkness. I became a toxic masculine. I became toxic patriarchy. I used and abused, and I did that to myself foremost and the most, and I became my own worst enemy. And it's taken me so much hard work to undo all of that. And the only way I could do it was with a woman. You cannot do this work on your own. But if you are on your own, there are tips, and I'm going to do other videos on that. If you are on your own, you're not actually on your own because you have your ancestors with you and you can ask for help. And if you're not spiritual, there's other ways I can help you, but um, you're never on your own. You're not. I'm here. So, um, those egos, those parts of your ego, whether from a past life or this life, influence your current being now. Now, if it's a past life and it's been a really, really bad wound, like I've gone through some grief portals that where I've screamed and cried so much that I've gone through a whole toilet roll. I literally cried a river, right? Because there are some memories that are so tragic and so painful that you just leave them to the last, because they're so rough. And one of mine was there was a war. I don't know how many 100,000 years ago. There was a war here, and we got caved in, the sinking of Atlantis, and I lost my closest friend, and right before my eyes, and I had to grieve that. I had to grieve that. And by doing so, it opened up my heart, and I felt lighter, and I felt free, and I felt the love for that person that I had lost. So it was absolutely magical, absolutely magical. I'm going to talk about ego babies now. Ego babies are hilarious. My partner and I came up with this concept because we were behaving like absolute children sometimes, or teenagers. So ego babies are essentially when you become trapped in certain stages of development, such as a child or a teenager. Discuss and how these undeveloped parts can affect your decision making as an adult. And it's very common. It's very common. I'll give you an example for myself. When I was going through the integration of my ego, in order to integrate the death of the ego or to even kill the ego, there's certain things you must do, and one of those things is you must do things that your ego doesn't want you to do. So, like I said about going for a run, if you find it difficult to go for a run, it's because your ego knows it's going to die if you go for a run. But one of mine was drawing. right? Such a big thing for me. I don't know why, because I didn't think I wanted to draw, but my soul really wanted to draw. And I would draw something and I'd go, that's fucking shit. And I would snap the pencil and throw it across the room and then throw the paper. And that's an ego baby. It's because I wasn't coached or loved through that process of learning how to create what I didn't know how to create. You know, it could be learning an instrument, it could be doing something that you always wanted to do, but you're just too freaking afraid, right? And my partner Hazel, because my ego babies were children because my trauma happened as a child, but my partner, her trauma happened as a teenager. So her ego babies are ego teenagers, right? And so sometimes I would ask her a question, she'd be like, "Hmm." And I'd be like, "Oh, do you want to cuddle? Do you want to cuddle?" Right? And that, you know, you can break up that energy sometimes with humor. And when they crack a smile, you know it's just an act from the ego. So that's another method is humor. Humor is great at killing the ego. It's one of the best forms of healing is humor and laughter. So I'll just say there's a great show on Amazon at the moment. It's about all these comedians and they're not allowed to laugh. If you're having a really rough day and you want to kill your ego, just watch that and just laugh your ass off. Laugh your ego off. Laugh your bad day off. Just find ways of laughing, honestly. It's really a great concept of the divine journey and divine comedy. Now, I'm going to talk about honoring the death of the ego. So, we talk a lot about killing the ego, killing the narcissist, and yeah, there is a lot of killing, and you can do that in several different ways. Just fix the camera. But there are times when a really beautiful part of yourself will come through. It needs to be honored. And for me, it was a Grail night. And I remember I was in a ceremonial process on winter solstice because I'm going to talk about this, the seasons, certain seasons, especially in a women's menstrual cycle. But I'm going to talk about the winter solstice. When we go into winter, it's the death energy. So you notice all the trees, they let go of their leaves and the twigs and branches are bare and you can see them completely exposed like a skeleton. That's what it's like working in the winter when you do the healing. You have to work a lot through the death. And I went through a 5 hour process of dying, and I found my ego found it very tedious, just lying there and dying. And so I had to find ways of surrendering and honoring that death. And through that death, I met the Grim Reaper, I met the Angel of Death, I went, parts of me went to Valhalla, and there was all these different versions of death. There was the even that the Mexican feminine death. All these different versions of death came to collect, and it was really beautiful, really beautiful. I wasn't afraid, and my ego really kicked up an enormous fuss. And I remember it all surrounded, all these ego entities surrounded me to bully me and make me, you know, want to get up and walk out the room instead of lying there and surrendering to the ego. And I remember I said I was really proud of myself. I said, they said they surrounded me and all these like demonic entities. They said to me, um, you can't get out of this. We've surrounded you." And I said, "Oh no, you've got it wrong. I'm not in here with you. You're in here with me." And as soon as I said that, they were like, "Ah." They all started running away. And I was like, "No, it's too late. You're done for." And it really is like a conversation. And I'm not saying you have you absolutely never go through a two-way conversation with the ego. You just tell it. You tell it, you're done. That's it. You are the dominant force. This is how you deal with entities as well. You are the dominant force. And if you don't believe that, you're being tricked because you are an infinite soul of love. You are an embodiment of a part of God. You have infinite power and you have the power over any dark force because you are love, because love destroys darkness. And I'm talking about the distortion of darkness, not the purity of it. And so you can command, you can command that. But if we're talking about big parts of ego, not entities, we're talking about lifetimes, then you have to go through the process of understanding what you need to do to integrate that ego death. And like I said, that normally means doing something creative or expressive. expressing the voice. Like one of my integrations for killing my ego was creating my YouTube channel. And I found it so difficult. You look at some of my earlier videos, trying to make myself be heard and trying to say all the right things. And every time I came off, I would look at my videos and I would beat my ass up about it. And that was just another version of my ego saying, don't do that again. I don't want to die. And so I just had to keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back. Improvement, improvement, improvement. And each time we do that, we learn even greater ways to ascend and expand. And this is why I offer all these coaching services online, because I've just become an expert at it through living it and doing it because I had to. Because if I didn't, I was going to die. My dreams were going to die and I was going to die. It was that serious for me because that's how much I surrendered. That's how much I devoted myself to the journey. I gave up my job. I gave up everything. I gave up everything that was no longer serving me. And I was living off savings. So I really, really do know how to do this. I'm going to talk about some more honoring of the death, and I'm going to talk about the menstrual cycle. And this is a very relationship thing. If there's any women and men listening to this part of the video, this is really profound, especially if you turn this back to your relationships or any relationship that you're in, and you can see how profound this is. And I'm going to do more videos on this. But when a woman goes into her autumn week, which is the third week of her menstrual cycle, this is the letting go of the leaves from the tree. And the way that is expressed in the masculine when he has that abandonment wound is, oh, you're letting go of me. You're going to dump me. You're going to leave me for another man. And this happens in relationships in August and September. I see this all the time. I always warn my closest friends, hey, mate, we're going in August, September. It's the letting go. Be careful in your relationship. Take care. And so many relationships end then. And this is how it happens in menstrual cycles. This is why relationships end. And it's about the honoring of death. You need to, when a woman goes into her cave time, man needs to go in the opposite direction and be in his own space. We're taught to constantly be together, but the divine union isn't that. Divine union is being in your own energy and expressing love to each other through honoring each other's um, uh, processes. And when you look at the menstrual cycle, it's really triggering for a man. I've had to go through this because it triggers the abandonment wound, and it's really sometimes happens most of the time unconsciously, and it creates a burst of narcissistic behavior. The ego comes up. And it works for the feminine as well, because the feminine has to say no, she has to put up boundaries there. But if she's not used to doing that, then her ego babies will come up. And it's very difficult for the woman because all she wants to do is just relax and let it go. But the masculine comes in and goes, hey, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done this? Why do I have to do everything? And it's just this clash of egos. It's this war between death and life and this fear of death. And so that has to be honored. That's another way of honoring the death. I'm going to talk about failure, the role of failure and the ego. So this is really important. Failure is so important. You cannot learn without it because in order to learn, you have to fail. And the ego will teach you um, all the reasons why you shouldn't begin because you're going to fail. But that's the reason why you should begin. Because if you begin thinking you're going to win first time, you've already failed. You need to fail by taking action. Like I say, this drawing, right? I didn't know how to draw for toffee. So I started watching YouTube videos and buying books how to draw. And I just bought a pad and I just start drawing. And it's painful. It's really painful for me because it's a deep hidden passion where in a past lifetime either my hands were cut off or something like that, that prevented me from being able to express my creativity. One memory that came up from my cache was I was living in Greece and they wanted to paint everything white, and I thought, no, you need to add color, and there was something about expressing my speech, and they imprisoned me and all this nonsense, right? So I don't like Greece. Honestly, that's how it expresses itself, right? I have no problem with Greece, but because of what happened to me in a past lifetime, I freaking absolutely don't want to go there. I've been there. I don't like the food. I just don't like it. Everything's white. It's like, ah. Anyway, that's some of the punchlines that you can come through healing, right? But I just want to just say again, right? The fear of failure is actually the fear of humiliation, yeah? And it's not humiliation from someone else. Yes, that happens, but it's actually the fear of your own humiliating yourself. And I've been through this so many times, and it leads to ego preservation, right? So if you're afraid to do something, if you're afraid to get up on stage and learn to talk and make mistakes, or if you're afraid to dance, you're whatever you're afraid to do of, if you don't do it, you're never going to do it because you have to fail. But just put yourself in a position where you don't fail in a position where it does feel humiliating and you do feel hurt. Just take smaller steps. And again, I offer coaching on this, so I know how sensitive it is. I had to go through it, and I'm still going through it. It's different. I'm learning so many different things. So I just went full on, head on into devotion. I gave everything up, and all of a sudden, all of these parts of my divine purpose started showing themselves. And like I said, one of them was drawing. So some of the now I'm going to talk about the one of the big subjects around ego death and all of this is sacrifice, right, and personal growth. So I'm going to talk in depth about what sacrifice truly is, and it's so profound because I learned this through the Akash. I kept getting visions of the Aztecs, right, and how they used to sacrifice people, and sacrifice goats. And the goat, I'm all about animal wisdom. The goat scapegoat is essentially it's used to put all your sins in. So the sins of the family, like for example, if you're the scapegoat of the family, it's the family putting all their projections and sins and blaming you, and then saying, "Yeah, do one," and you get killed. I don't mean physically, but you get murdered by the ego, by the matrix. And it's the same with what happened in the Aztecs, right? It's about the miscommunication, the misunderstanding of love from spirit. Love demands sacrifice, and those communications come from spirit, they come from the star grid and the earth grid. But back then, they were misunderstood by the priests. But it's not a priest's job, it's a shaman's job, right? And this is why there's so few good shamans about this day, because the shamans were well, they were chased out of towns, for lack of a better term. But they were let's use the Aztec city as an example. They were chased out of the jungle by the people because the priests manipulated the people into believing that it was the shaman's fault, but actually it was the priests, which is still going on this day, who were manipulating the power of the shamans for darkness because they didn't understand the power of love, right? And so what happened? They started receiving these messages of sacrifice, right, around heart surgery and heart opening. And they misconstrued that as cutting out the hearts of people and offering it to the gods. This is how misconstrued it is. This is how misconstrued the energy of sacrifice is. But the truth is, it's about you offer a sacrifice from your heart of your ego to the gods. That's what true sacrifice is. It's a spiritual sacrifice, not a physical one. It's a spiritual death, not a physical death. So when the ego gives you all the excuses it can to avoid dying, it normally starts giving you suicidal thoughts. I had this for donkey's years. Kill yourself, Alistair. Do it this way. It made me imagine all the different ways I could kill myself until I realized it was when I was closest to a breakthrough, breaking through the ceiling. It always wanted to die. It was actually the ego saying, "I want to die. Please kill me. If you don't, here are all the ways you can kill yourself." So this is why I tried to get this message out there about suicide prevention. You don't have to kill yourself. You just have to kill your ego. And it's such a relief, but the process it's so difficult sometimes to learn how and know how to do that. If you're in a really difficult position and you don't know how to kill your ego, there's so many different ways you can do that. But like I say, it's normally like if you're really on the brink, then you have to make a drastic choice. Like say for example, you were in debt, right? And your wife had left you and you'd lost someone to disease or something, and you just, life didn't feel like worth living, and you were on the edge. that's a calling for evolution, and it's your soul giving you all of these trials to overcome, because they're like pockets of love, which, when turned from darkness into light, fuel you into a new dimension, a new reality. And I know it may sound a bit drastic, but that's really the majority of what people are going through. And I've met people who've been on the brink. And in order to get through that brink, first there's a process of purging, of just speaking out what it is, and somebody holding space to listen. That's step number one. Because most of the reason these people are in that position is because they haven't been heard or listened to. And I can really put my hand on my heart and say, I've been through that too. And it's really tough. And then it's about taking care of yourself, making drastic new choices that you've never made before. And guidance and support is needed in that. That's why I say it's very difficult to do it on your own. You shouldn't have to do it on your own. And there's so much support out there. So I think I've gone into a lot of detail on this. I hope this is very helpful for a lot of people. And I hope it blows your mind that the Akash is the Akashic, sorry, the Akash, that the ego is the Akashic records. I think that's amazing. And it's the first time I share this on with anyone other than my partner. So I'm really giving a lot here. So if you know anyone that would like to further their development, check out my website, thesacredrainbowwarrior.com, and check out the notes in here for free animal guides, meditations, and plant medicine integration. And I will be bringing a lot more, but I offer coaching for pretty much anything: relationships, ascension, mental health, trauma, you name it. I'm here. I'm your man. Peace out. Peace in.